You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and it is Sunday, so that must mean I'm here with Macon Gillespie from the Grove Report. How you doing, John?
Doing well, Stephen. How about yourself?
I don't know, but the vibe behind you makes me think that I should be doing a book report on Tom Sawyer.
Yeah, right. It's a little library type setting, but got some space to myself. So happy to have that whenever I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Just whenever you forget, you see those shelves, and the only type you see those type shelves are in school libraries, and it like instantly took me back seeing that in the background.
Yeah, it's kind of a nostalgic wash that comes over you a little bit like that.
Yeah. Well, the Egg Bowl is moving off of Thanksgiving Day, and it's moving into Black Friday. And this is my thoughts on this. I was a fan of the Thanksgiving Day. Now, I do realize that people that cover the Ole Miss games and have to go to the games hate Thanksgiving Day games like the Fire of a Thousand Suns. I get that. But I enjoyed that game. And I was worried that they were going to move the game till Saturday. And the reason for that is anybody that is a fan of Ole Miss or State, this game is going to cause anxiety and ruin the whole weekend if you're waiting for that to happen. So I just wanted something before Friday because I enjoyed watching the games after the Egg Bowl in the last couple of years. This Friday time slot, 2:30, it could be really great. I think maybe it was TJ Oxley or somebody like that pointed out that the last time that Ole Miss and State played on Friday was 2008. Which that's the 45-0 beatdown. So I guess I should be all in favor of that. But all in all, I think the playoff run is in a better, easier position with this move. And I am glad that it's not on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that if you talk to media members and some fans about the Thanksgiving Day version of this game, that it was not very highly thought of, especially with the media. Because, I mean, Thanksgiving, kind of want a breather, kind of want a break, you just spend some time with some family. But, having it on Friday still gives you that kind of national audience type thing that you were getting with a Thursday night. And, I think that's something that both programs can benefit from, obviously. And then I think I saw today after the Egg Bowl, I think Georgia and Georgia Tech are also playing on ABC, unless I misread that. So, that'll be fun. I do think Black Friday college football is kind of a cool thing. I kind of look forward to it in rivalry week. But, yeah, it being kind of thrust in the middle of things on Saturday, I wasn't really wanting either. With, the Iron Bowl kind of comes to mind. That usually kind of takes precedence of things on Saturday. So, I think I think Black Friday makes sense. I that's kind of how it was when I grew up. It was a lot of times on Black Friday.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. Like I said, the Ed Orgeron's last game, that was on a Friday. That was played down in Starkville, and then there was the beat down by Houston Nutt was the last time it was on Saturday. Last time was on Friday. Everybody's like, hey, ESPN just started doing this game on Thanksgiving. Back in the 90s. And I was like, well, for the better part of 30 years, this was a Thanksgiving game. That's officially tradition. You don't have to go back to 1955 for something to be traditional.
Right. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure the 2003 Egg Bowl, which is the first one in my memory, was on Thanksgiving. Eli's last one, I think, was on Thanksgiving Day. And then, after that, it would kind of, from what I remember, bounce around some, it'd be Thursday or Saturday or Friday. But then we kind of got locked into this Thursday thing for a few years. And, it does provide some really good exposure. It does have to go up against the NFL slate that day, which, is nobody's going to win that. But You know,
I don't think you
I think
have.
Friday
By the
would.
way, I don't think you have to. I think that's an excuse by media to avoid doing something. But it doesn't matter. The people that's going to watch the college games was always going to watch the college game. I mean, and the college fans are going to watch the college game. I saw a whole bunch of tweets today about how they were upset that the Egg Bowl got moved off of Thanksgiving. People like general fans from around the country
Yeah.
about what it could mean because the game is just so ridiculous. So I think that's a little bit of an overdone thing and is basically a crutch by some media people, which, like we said, do not like this game.
Yeah, I've had multiple Thanksgiving dinners in the press box, and was not really a fan of that vibe. But uh, anyway, I do think that the Friday slate is a good time for it.
Yeah, and the other thing we found out about is Ole Miss is going to get a little bit of JP Sports throwback with a game on the CW at Wake Forest. It's going to be a primetime game. I do not know if it's going to be between Dawson's Creek and the Flash or maybe a new episode of Walker. Stay tuned to find out what's going to go on there, bud.
Yeah, it's kind of it is kind of a throwback thing there a little bit, right? Because my parents still they have one of those digital antennas now that you can pick up local stations with or whatever. And the CW is one of those. And I think that's the only way they can get the CW. So when they're watching that game, they're going to have to hook up to the antenna. And I mean, it's going to be like we're back in what, 2000
Oh,
or the 90s or something.
yeah, yeah. Do you have any young kids or whatever that can hold at an angle a little bit? If you,
Yeah,
yeah,
that used to be my job.
yeah.
But it's I don't know. It feels a little weird for an
Mm.
SEC team to be playing on the CW, but at the same time, sometimes I find myself missing that Jefferson Pilot kind of feel for a game a little bit, and so I think we'll get that. And that's a game that Ole Miss on paper should win. So we'll see, but uh, I think it's definitely an interesting move there to have a college football playoff contender playing on the CW in a primetime slot.
Oh, it's so ACC. I just want the three Daves to show up and call this game. I want Rascal Flats, Bob that head to start off at the beginning of the broadcast. And let's just do it. If we're going to do it, let's lean into the Jefferson Pilot ridiculousness.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that you saying the three Daves thing brought back even more memories. I hadn't even thought about that for a while. That's true. Yeah, I mean that would be really fun, right? I mean it's because that's the football I grew up with. Is that version of television broadcast. So it'll be interesting, and some fans may kind of bristle at that a little bit because it's not a big market station that's carrying it or whatever. But I think it's kind of cool.
But at least it's not the Longhorn Network.
Well, that's also very true. Yeah, that at least it's not that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or someplace like the Pac-12 network that you couldn't even find.
Yeah,
Which,
you have to go through some kind of illegal streaming service to find the
yeah,
Pac-12 network in some
it
places.
is absolutely nuts. Which, by the way, the ACC should be ashamed of themselves. California is going to be in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and a group of that's institutions of higher learning are joined together into the Atlantic Coast Conference, and they have California in that conference. That should be like a warning label that's on the side of cigarettes of "Do not go to this school."
And I know this isn't a conference realignment talk, but
Mhm.
I understand parts of it, right? Like Oklahoma and Texas makes sense in the SEC. Okay,
Mhm.
I think culturally, obviously each school is a little different culturally, but I think they make sense in the SEC.
And they
But
touch
I also
states,
think,
SEC
huh?
states. They touch
Right, yeah,
SEC
exactly.
states.
So but I also think that conferences still need some form of to make some form of geographic sense.
Mhm.
One, just because of travel expenses, but two, because are people who grew up fans of Stanford or Cal or whatever, are they going to care that they have a conference game against Wake Forest? Like, I don't think that really registers on any kind of level there. So I personally hate that, like with a
Mhm.
burning passion that they're in the ACC. I understand it was done for financial reasons, but still, I really don't like it.
Yeah, if you have a swim meet and Cal goes to Miami for a swim meet, that can't make sense.
How much
Especially,
money? How much
yeah,
money are you losing on that trip?
especially in this age of revenue sharing, to where you're going to have to use part of your budget now to give money to the athletes. Now, officially, conference realignment makes 0 sense. None.
And it really does hurt those Olympic sports. Seriously. I mean,
Mm.
football can make it, even though I hate it for football. I think it can survive that, but the Olympic sports are going to be what wind up feeling the brunt of this, I think. We'll just have to see, but that's how I see it playing out.
I think football is safe, basketball is safe, both men's and women's. And I think the line happened right below that, to where there's even some places that's just going to start chopping baseball. From
Mhm.
baseball down, you're going to see a lot of cuts.
Yeah.
And I think Title IX is just gone, because what they're going to do is argue that they do not have to give the revenue sharing money to them, because Title IX is not financial, it's opportunity or something like that, to where that doesn't happen, to where the financial investment does not happen there. And it's just all basketball and football. That's what I think
Yeah.
is going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds, but I do think it has the potential to get messier than it already is.
Mhm.
It's I don't know. We're all just kind of along for the ride a little bit, just kind of going where the wind takes us, and we'll see where it finally ends up.
Hey, somebody that does daily content, I do want to thank them for this, for as
No, that's
long as it
very
goes
true. Yeah, it
unthanked.
is.
Yeah.
It can be good for business. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, we are going to get John's top 5 Ole Miss greatest football wins. But first, I do want to let you know, Gametime is the place to get your NBA Finals tickets. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices. You can see your seat. Their lowest price guarantee. They take the guesswork out of buying these NBA tickets. They have this lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, and job loss protection. They've got all of these different things that fit under the umbrella of customer service. They have one of the better systems in ticketing, if you ask me. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Also, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, prayer props, and more. Hey, the over-under for Ole Miss winning this football season is at 9.5, if that is your flavor or choice. Maybe you want something a little bit like, hey, Ole Miss is minus 122 to make the college football playoff in 2024. Or we can go a little bit granular on that. Jackson Dart is plus 1,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. That's roughly 15-1 if that is the value that you're looking for. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down all the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So John Macon Gillespie is on the hot seat today. Today we are going to do the top 5 greatest Ole Miss football wins of all time. And the way this works, in case anybody is tuning in for the first time, it's a standard countdown. We go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we get to figure out what John's greatest victory in Ole Miss football history is. So let's get this started, John. Number 5.
All right. Recency bias again for me this week. Number 5, I'm going 2008 at Florida. I think that was obviously a really big one. Ole Miss wound up on the cover of Sports Illustrated after that. That kind of put that team on the map a little bit, even though if you look back at that season, they had some questionable losses, because that team was not perfect to start. But that was really
Mentally
kind of the
fragile.
momentum. Yeah, that was kind of really the momentum starter for that season. Florida's only lost that season, obviously a really big one.
Yes, and made Tebow cry, which is
Yeah,
always
that
a
too.
benefit.
Yeah.
Number 4.
I am going with the, I guess technically the 2016 Sugar Bowl after the 15 season. That was Ole Miss's first Sugar Bowl win in however many years it was at that point in
Since
time.
Archie Manning.
Yeah, since Archie. Obviously, that's a big one for the historical majority of the SEC's existence. That was the biggest bowl game SEC teams could go to. Obviously, that was a really big season for Ole Miss, again with a head scratching loss or two. But that was a really, really big moment for that team. That was a really good football team.
Yes, I will never forgive Hugh Freeze for putting Robert Kimdichie in at running back in that game and going for that first down. That was the point that Ole Miss lost that game, and potentially it exposed some flaws a little bit later on that they ended up losing that Arkansas game. That it probably didn't win the SEC because Robert Kimdichie played running back that day.
Yeah, just a little cute type deal. Yeah.
Number 3.
2023 LSU. I'm going with that one because it is the biggest on-campus crowd in school history. Obviously, it was an insane game, and I have it on here because of what winning that game, in my opinion, sparked for the rest of the season. Obviously, I think that was a really big turning point looking back in that year or this past season. Eventually getting to 11 wins, the most in school history. If Ole Miss loses that game, I think the season looks very different.
Number 2.
2015 Alabama going to Tuscaloosa, winning there, I think for the first time since the 80s, maybe. I don't really exactly remember when the last time was before that. Yeah. But that was obviously a big one. Quincy Attaboy-Joe's helmet catch, Chad
Tip
Kelly.
6. That was the tip
Yeah, the
6,
tip
man.
6. Yeah. Obviously, that was a really big moment that's still played on social media today. Ole Miss was kind of already on the map at that point, but still going into Tuscaloosa and taking down Alabama was a big deal.
And number 1.
2014 Alabama. That is, to me, I think the penultimate game of the last, I don't know, long time, I guess ever in this case, since that's what we're talking about. Ole Miss winning that game in 2014 over Alabama really established it as being back on the scene a little bit. Even though NCAA things happened later, but it kind of showed. I think looking back, even today, showed what the program is capable of, and the heights that it's getting really, really close to reaching potentially this season. That was a big one, and the pictures from that, the fans storming the field, the goalposts coming down, that's going to live in Ole Miss lore forever.
Yeah, I was at that game, and I did not storm the field because I'm a grown-up.
That's true. I would not have. I was not at that game. But I would not have stormed the field probably because I enjoy my safety. So I
Yeah, that's
decided
what I
not to
said.
do
It's
that.
like I'm not going down there. That nothing good can happen if I walk on that field.
No.
So that is stuff you obviously did your recency bias stuff. So there was no like 1977 Notre Dame. There was no immaculate deflection. There was no mule game. All of which big 1952 Maryland. Those are the historical games. And the reason I bring this up is in your list, you were talking about 14 and 15, and that was big. Like this is the point where Ole Miss turned the corner into what we see today. It started in 2014 and 2015. Well, the point is, if Ole Miss does what we expect them to do this year, that Georgia game, if Ole Miss can get that Georgia game, it's looking it'll break every attendance record that Ole Miss has on the book. It'll make 2014 and Katy Perry look like child's play. Game day will be here. Heck, you might even have big noon kickoff here for that game. And that's weird to think about that they could just show up and do something like that as well. What do you think that looks like? Because I've seen 2014 Bama. I saw 2012 Texas, which was low key a zoo as well.
Yeah, I think that if the season goes how we think it has the potential to go, leading up to November 9th, I think that becomes at that time the biggest on-campus game in Ole Miss's history. I think that I can probably say that without much hesitation. I think it would be you can't even really describe how big it would be, because if Ole Miss wins that game, I mean, you're talking things that haven't been talked about on that campus maybe ever. I mean, it's, I think if Ole Miss were to win that game, let's say for argument's sake, Ole Miss is undefeated going into that game and it beats Georgia, that becomes number one on my list. I'll just put it
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and this is a weird thing that nobody has talked about. Nobody have even said anything about this, but this is the first time that Ole Miss football is going to go through this, to where the sole destination is Oxford, Mississippi. Because back when Ole Miss was really good and playing for championships and all of that stuff, every big game was played in Jackson. So
Yep.
this is the first season that all of this can kind of happen in Oxford. So like I tell everybody, just enjoy this. This should be fun.
Yeah, and it is interesting that you say that, because recently I've looked back at some of those old seasons and seeing just how many of those games were played in Jackson, and thinking to myself, okay, what would that have been like had it been in Oxford? I mean, that can be said for countless games from that era when those teams were really, really good. So yeah, this is uncharted territory for Oxford a little bit, and I think it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, because of Jackson, I think when Billy Brewer took over as head coach in '83, I think the attendance in Jackson for Vaught Hemingway was like 30,000 people. It wasn't that much bigger than M.M. Roberts at that point. And Scott Field and Starkville was the same way, because they used Jackson the same way. The double headers in Jackson was really fun. Now, there's a really cool thing. Now, that was done at the detriment of Scott Field and Vaught Hemingway Stadium, but it was really cool that Ole Miss was taking on LSU at 1:00 and Mississippi State was playing Alabama at 7 on the same day. Now, that was cool.
Yeah, that's something you don't get today, obviously. I mean, that's something that would be really cool if, of course, I didn't live through that, but if I could jump in a time machine and go back to that, I'd like to see it, just kind of what it was like, because you're going to get a mixture of 4 different fan bases, 4 different school cultures, 4 different, whatever, there at that same place. It's pretty special.
And listen, you're too young to remember this. You haven't seen anything like it. The Ole Miss Southern Mississippi game was in 1984, 83, when I was like a young tyke, a little guy. That was a cool looking game. Now, I'm not saying it was everything else was going on, but it was a cool looking game with that gold and black and the red and blue. It looked really neat in this stadium. Almost, if you think about Florida and Georgia, the contrast, that's kind of what the stadium looked like whenever they played, because of the brightness of the red and blue and the gold and black.
That's one reason why I like the Ole Miss LSU rivalry so much. One, obviously the passion, but two, I think it's one of the best, if not the best looking college football game in the sport. Like it has the potential to be anyway, if they both play it right. And that's one of my favorite parts of it.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. John Macon Gillespie from the Grove Report joins us. What's going on this weekend, bud?
Well, obviously we kind of had a little bit of a busy week, some basketball announcements, all that kind of stuff going on. Spring meetings, talked about that this week. And obviously we're heading towards June, which is going to be kind of a big recruiting time. So that's going to be most of what we're kind of focusing on over the next week or so.
All right. Well, take care. And if anything comes up, man, if you need anything, let me know.
All right. Appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you.
Take care, bub.